Hello, everyone, again. This is part two of lesson two within the Jaimini Level 2 course. As we know, we've been talking about both the calculation and the utilization of a special Jaimini Dasha called Padanadhamsha Dasha that's calculated primarily on the basis of the Navamsha and then interpreted solely on the basis of the Navamsha. And so pulling up my document here, where we left off was we're about to look at the chart of the very famous English poet George Gordon, which you should now see before you here, better known as Lord Byron. And here we're going to see a different progression than what we've seen before. The birth lagna here is Gemini, so as you may recall, the first thing we want to do is to find the Pada lagna, the Aruda lagna of the birth chart, and see who the lord of that is. In his case, because the lagna lord Mercury here goes 7 signs away, and then counting 7 from there actually brings us back to Gemini. So in his case, both the birth lagna and the Aruda lagna, Pada lagna, is going to be the same, ruled by Mercury. And if we see his Mercury in Navamsha, we'll see that it's in the same sign it is in the birth chart, meaning it's Vargotama, in which case, in his situation or his birth chart, we're going to realize that the Padanadhamsha Dasha is going to start from the sign Sagittarius. And since Sagittarius is among the dual Rashis, you may recall that the progression in this case is going to be by trions, either forward by trions if it's an odd Rashi, odd dual Rashi, or we're going to be going backwards by trion if it's an even Rashi. Now, in this case, because Sagittarius is an odd Rashi, then we know that it's going to progress starting forward, meaning first Dasha is going to be Sagittarius, next Dasha is going to be Aries, next Dasha after that is going to be Leo. So having determined where it starts and how it progresses, we now need to calculate length of Dashas, starting with Sagittarius. So the Lord Jupiter, again, because it's a odd Rashi, the counting is going to be direct, in which case the Lord Jupiter has gone 9 signs away. So Sagittarius period is going to be a full 9 years. Coming next then to Aries, we see that it has its Lord Mars there, so that means it's going to be a full 12 years. So 9 plus 12 is going to be 21. And so we now come to the third period, which is going to be, we're again progressing by trions forward. So we're going to come to Leo. And I want to pause on this one. But first of all, before we start interpreting here or making some interpretation, we'll calculate the length. Leo is going to be 9 years because the Lord, the Sun, is 9 signs away counting forward. And we count forward because Leo, again, is a odd Rashi. So this is going to encompass from age 21 to age 30. Now, Byron only lived to age 36, so he only had, I think 5 periods is all he experienced, but a good portion of his young adulthood obviously occurred in this Leo period, and it was this period that he became really widely celebrated and within, within England and actually throughout Europe and even North America. In the U.S., he became kind of widely known poet and was one of the major celebrities of his time, just a really extremely famous individual that he became, and that happened all in his Leo major period. Now, this happened, he became famous for what? He became famous for authorship, right? So if you look in the chapter on the effects of planets from the Karakamsha Lagna, you'll see some combinations that are given there that are said to make a person a successful author. They involve, number one, the moon, and then after that, all the natural benefics, meaning Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. And what is particularly highlighted is the moon-Jupiter combination. And what the sutras are saying is that if from the Karakamsha Lagna, or in this case, if you're using the Vamsha, from the Swamsha Lagna, if there are the influence of these grahas on either the first house or the 5th house from the Swamsha Lagna in this case, these are combinations that would make a person a successful author. Well, let's examine that from the standpoint of Byron's Navamsha. First of all, you have the Karaka of authorship, which one of two Karakas, one would be Mercury, one would be Jupiter. In this case, you have the Karaka of authorship falling right in his Karakamsha Lagna, which of course is going to be Sagittarius because his planet with the highest degrees is Mercury. It becomes the Amakaraka, it's Vargotama. So both the Karakamsha Lagna, as we're applying it in the birth chart, and then also Swamsha Lagna, as we're applying it in the Navamsha, are going to be Sagittarius. So we see within Sagittarius this Vargotama significator of authorship, Mercury. But then if we look at the fifth house from there, we see how strong it becomes, because then it has Mars, the fifth lord, in the fifth house from Karakamsha Lagna with an exalted sun, and then see the influence of Rashi Drishti of different grahas and different karakas upon it. And the thing I want to highlight in particular is that the Moon-Jupiter combination from Leo is going to be aspecting onto Aries, which is the fifth house from Swamsha Lagna. But then also you have Venus here, another natural benefic, aspecting onto that same fifth house from Swamsha Lagna as well. Swamsha Lagna is actually it's got two planets in it. It gets the Rashi Drishti of two more, so that's 6 in total. And notice how the very combinations that were given in the Jaimini Sutra, where you want to see either the influence of the natural benefics, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus, and or the moon, onto the first house or the fifth house from Karakamsha or Swamsha Lagna in this case. And that's exactly what we see here in total, and then even more. And then, those of you who took my Essentials of Jaimini course, we talked about a special Jaimini Raja Yoga referred to as Maharaj Yoga that can come about when the AK, planet with the highest degrees, and the PK, the planet with the fifth highest degrees, are combined either in the Karakamsha or Swamsha Lagna or in the fifth house from there. So we see that that's exactly the case here. Mercury is his AK, Saturn is his PK, and they're in the Swamsha Lagna in the Navamsha that we're interpreting here, which is then a Jaimini Maharaj Yoga. So we see here this combination for great fame, in this case becoming a Maharaj of poets, and also these combinations right out of the Jaimini Sutras for success as an author, particularly highlighting the influence of Jupiter and the Moon jointly on the Swamsha Lagna, or the fifth house from there, if we're applying these combinations to Navamsha. Again, exactly what we say here. Then, now he comes to the Jupiter period, right? I'm sorry, the Leo period that contains this very Moon-Jupiter combination, and then also see how strong the fifth house comes from there, with this Vargotama Karaka of authorship, Mercury, and combining with the AK and the PK, where the Jaimini Raja Yoga dynamically, when you're using Leo as a Lagna, because this was the major period when he became a famous author, how that combination now is falling in the fifth house from there. So it's just a beautiful and brilliant illustration of Jaimini principles, and in particular, the timing of his great success and fame as an authorship with the Padanadhamsha Dasha. And so this happened in a Leo major period, as I mentioned, which was a 9-year period. Now, the beginning of that, if I can show you this here, Leo subperiods, the beginning of this would have happened in his Capricorn major period. After graduating from Cambridge with a friend, which was a very typical thing for the sons of the aristocracy to do at that time, he went on what's called the Grand Tour, which was a tour of Europe and also Asia Minor. And during that time, he began writing a narrative poem called Childe Harold. And when him and his friend, after about a year and a half, returned to London, he took it to a publisher who liked what he saw, and it got published. And as he's been famously quoted as saying, I woke up the next morning and I was famous, and just kind of became the toast of London during that time. And this would have been the Capricorn sub-period. one thing I hadn't highlighted before is that, not only does Leo have the Moon-Jupiter combination, but you'll see that Jupiter is his AMK, right? And it's combining with the DK, which again also gives a Jaimini Raja Yoga, but particularly the idea of the AMK here, he's running the sign of, and this is when he had his initial success and great fame as an author. The sub-period was actually Capricorn, and so when you think about what Capricorn gets the influence of, you'll notice that it gets the influence of that Moon-Jupiter combination, which is both influencing Capricorn and the 10th house from there, Libra. And so it was in this sub-period that he got his initial success. And something I'm kind of backing up to thinking about the Leo major period for him in general, something maybe I've not mentioned as much in talking about these different combinations in the Navamshas of people. But you can see that Leo also gets a good Argala, a benefic Argala from Venus falling in the 4th from there. Again, when we're considering Argala, we're not taking into account the nodes. And so there's Venus is the sole, major graha there, not a Chaya graha, and there's nothing in the 10th from there, which would be Taurus. So in addition to everything we've seen about what's happening with regards to Leo, it also gets this good Shubha Argala. So this period proved very fortunate for him with regards to great success as an author and fame. But, showing you this table again, you'll notice that the moon is there in Leo, and it is the DK. And he's age 21 to 30, so it would be very natural and in keeping with what typically happened during that time of life back then, that he did marry, and he did marry. But what I want to highlight is that the sub-period was that of Aquarius. So he marries in the major period of Leo containing his DK moon, and the sub-period was actually Aquarius, from where the DK falls into the 7th house, which is just that classical timing of marriage in the Jaimini system that obviously Padanadhamsha Dasha is showing extremely well. So this is what I wanted to share with regards to Byron's chart. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the use of padas with regards to Padanadhamsha Dasha. Padas, of course, is a very, very important concept within the Jaimini system. And this is called Padanadhamsha Dasha because we start with seeing Padalagna in the birth chart and the Lord of that in terms of seeing its placement in Navamsha and where this Dasha begins. But curiously enough, when K.N. Rao taught me this Dasha, he said that what you wanted to do is to apply padas when interpreting this Dasha, but you're applying padas that are calculated based on the birth chart, not the Navamsha. Which, if you're saying, God, that sounds like a illogical concept because padas are based on the structure of a chart. This was my reaction as well. But, I'd learned to trust K.N. Rao and what he taught. And he never taught anything until he had tested it extensively and utilized it himself extensively. So, I just took that instruction and began utilizing it. So again, just to repeat what I'm talking about here, one of the things you're doing when you're using the Jaimini system and Jaimini's sign-based dashas to try to identify trends or to predict events is you want to mark the padas and see which padas relate to which signs. And the idea here is that if you're running the sign of some pada, for example, the pada of the 7th house, that this we saw earlier in the Essentials of Jaimini course can be a time that can bring marriage, or you can run the pada of the 5th house, P5, and this could make it eligible for bringing children. You could run the pada of the 10th house, P10, and this could indicate a significant period career-wise, particularly if additionally Jaimini Raja Yogas are there. So this is all how we're using padas. Well, now in this case, we're also using those padas, but we're timing them using the signs in Padanadhamsha Dasha and interpreting them again on the structure based on the Navamsha, not on the birth chart itself. And just to sort of illustrate this idea, if you go back to, and I'll let you do this on your own, I'm not going to return to the charts, but if you go back to the chart of Gwyneth Paltrow and you calculated the pada of her 10th house of the birth chart, you'll see that it comes out to be Cancer, which, as you may recall, was the period when she won her Oscar. So we saw the reasons how that could be seen normally, but then add to that the fact that Cancer is her P10 or 10th pada, then it just contributes more strongly to the kind of results career-wise that the Cancer period could have gone for her. And we saw that in the chart of Paramahansa Yogananda, that he became a Swami, that is an official sort of religious identity in his Aquarius period. And if you calculate his pada of the 9th house, P9 in his birth chart, you will see that it comes out to be Aquarius. Again, just sort of, and of course, Jupiter was there, if you recall, which is that symbol as well. But it just adds to the indication that something like that, of him becoming a Swami, could happen in the Aquarius period. And then we saw that in the Taurus period of Ramana Maharishi is when he was said to have attained full God realization, full enlightenment. And if you see which pada Taurus is of his birth chart, you'll see that it's the 8th pada, which is the house of samadhi, right? The experience of higher states of consciousness. And in a kind of a unusual sort of way in terms of how this got emphasized here, Byron's Leo, if you look back in his birth chart, Leo is his 11th pada. And it was during this Leo period that, Byron had a half-sister, same mother, different father. Her name was Augusta. And he had an incestuous affair with her. And this became known to his wife, and it instantly, obviously, caused a rupture in his marriage. She divorced him. It was a huge scandal in England at the time among the aristocracy, and as a result of that, he essentially left the country and never came back. And so, it was this pada of his 11th house that we had this major focus and experience on 11th house matter, which is older siblings. She was older than him in this case. So in all of these 4 instances of events that we've looked at, or time periods that we've looked at, the padas came into play interpretively as well. So this is something that you should be aware of, and also try to look to make use of yourself. So how did K.N. Rao make use of this, Dasha? I told you that it was one of his predictive tools, and when he taught it to me, it started to become one of my predictive tools. And when he was teaching me it, what he said he would do is, actually, once you understand it very well, and once you have some good practice doing it, you'll find that you can mentally calculate the major periods very quickly, very easily, just, in a matter of seconds, really, matter of minutes, depending on how old the person is and how many dashas you need to see. And so this is what he would do. And then this is an exact quote, he said he would get some major clues, some major hints about some of the potentials of that period, based on the Navamsha, and applying this Padanadhamsha Dasha and the patterning of it. The yogas are there, and particularly how that patterning was showing up using that particular sign as a Dasha Lagna. And then taking that clue, taking the hint of that, then he said he would start working with Chara Dasha, to maybe refine it as far as timing, as far as sub-periods go. And then even coordinating that when he thought he saw an event or a trend, just checking that out, say, for example, career-wise, and then looking at it in the Parashari point of view, using from Shotri, to see if that sort of corroborated that indication, whatever it was. And this was, again, what I've referred to as his composite technique. And this is really, as he explained it to me, what enabled him to really have some good predicting. Actually, he was a fantastic predictor, and an astonishing predictor, as far as being able to, as I said, see events both in a person's past and then prospectively in the future. And to sort of illustrate this idea, I had talked about how Prince William lost his mother, Lady Diana, to that terrible accident. It was in the major period of Gemini in his Padanadhamsha Dasha, and I'm not showing it here, but in his Navamsha, you may recall the moon, Karak of mother, and also the MK in his chart fell 8 from there, afflicted. It had an aspect of Mars, it had an aspect of the GK. And so this was indicating was with the DK, which is a Maraka in the Jaimini system. It showed the event with regards to Padanadhamsha Dasha. But if you then apply Chara Dasha to his chart, then you would know that it was in his Scorpio major period in Chara Dasha that this event happened. And then if you apply that, we're using Chara here now in the birth chart. If you put your finger on Scorpio, make Scorpio a Lagna, well, you can see now again the moon, which was both the natural significator of mother and also his MK, it falls in the 8th house from there. And under all malefic influence here, Rahu Ketu axis, influence of Saturn and Mars. It's a very dark moon. It's born around the time of the new moon, and so you can see that Scorpio major period definitely showed this period, this potential for this happening. And then in Vimshotri, the event happened in the major period of Jupiter and the sub period of Saturn. Well, his 4th house is Pisces, right? The Lord is Jupiter. And if you see where the Lord has gone from the 4th house, using Pisces, the 4th house is Lagna, you'll see that Jupiter, the Lord, goes into the 8th house from there. And then the sub-period was Saturn. And you'll see that Saturn and Mars, two very, the worst natural malefics, aspect onto the 4th house. So it was in the major period of Jupiter and the sub-period of Saturn in the Vimshotri Dasha that he lost his mother due to that fatal accident, which of course is a major, major tragedy in his life. And the point I'm making here is that if you saw the Gemini period in Padanadhamsha Dasha and the position of the MK in the moon in that Dasha, and then you saw it in Chara Dasha with respect to the birth tide, falling in the 8th again with affliction, and then you saw that he was running Jupiter Saturn in Vimshotri period and sub-period. All of them showed potential danger for the mother very clearly. And so this is an example of what he was talking about when he would say that, I'd quickly calculate Padanadhamsha Dasha, see the patterning there in D9, take some hints and clues about some potentials of that, and then start working with Chara next to see corroboration of that and maybe do timing versus sub-periods and so forth. But then also, cross-checking that again in the Parashari system using Vimshotri. So this is what he had explained to me as being his methodology, and of course, one that I then adopted myself. And so, I'll conclude my presentation, my initial presentation here on Padanadhamsha Dasha just by repeating what I said at the beginning, meaning that when I was instructed by him in this Dasha, I considered it to be one of the best gifts that I ever got from him. And, I've used it with good results. And so what I'd recommend that you do now is to, taking your own chart or someone of great interest to you, calculate the major periods up to, say, maybe the period that the person is currently in, and then also the sub-periods within that. Have some practice calculating this Dasha. And just become accustomed to doing that, and maybe working on a number of charts to calculate at least the major periods and start to get the feel for how that's done using the document that you're going to get as the reference. And just doing that, you'll find, again, that it looks a little complicated at first, but it's really not. Some simple things you need to keep in mind. And then, as I mentioned, at some point in the course here, not right away, every participant is going to get a Excel spreadsheet that will calculate this Dasha for you once you enter in all the planetary values and the ascendant So that will be a good tool that you can utilize where you won't have to calculate it manually yourself every time. And it's particularly useful with regards to the subperiods, which then are a little more tedious to calculate. So that is your second lesson. And so again, namaste, bye for now, until we meet again.